On Family Feud, a single mother won life-changing money, but her decision to give it all away ignited a network firestorm, threatening to expose the true cost of kindness. The lights were blinding, the way they always are. 1,000 suns burning down on a stage that had become my second home, my office, and sometimes my own personal circle of hell. I was in the control booth, perched high above the studio floor, looking down at the organized chaos of a Family Feud taping. My name is Mark, and for 8 seasons I've been a senior producer on the show. I've seen families win life-changing money, and I've seen them lose by a single heartbreaking point. I've seen Steve Harvey laugh so hard he cried, and I've seen him give fatherly advice that brought the whole room to a standstill. I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. On stage were the Hendersons and the Garcias. The Hendersons were the dictionary definition of a family you root for. Brenda, the matriarch, was a single mom of 3 who worked 2 jobs cleaning offices just to keep their heads above water. Her oldest son, Jamal, was a shy, brilliant kid who needed braces, and her 2 younger daughters were bubbly twins who bounced on their toes with every correct answer. They were playing for $20,000, a sum that might as well have been 20 million to them. They'd clawed their way to the fast money round, and the energy in the studio was electric. Steve, as always, was in his element. He was cracking jokes with Brenda's mother, who had come out to play the first half of the round. She'd done okay, not great. 112 points. It was doable, but it would be tight. Now it was Brenda's turn. As she walked to the podium, I could see her hands trembling from my monitor. She gave Steve a watery, nervous smile. He leaned in, microphone in hand, and his whole demeanor softened. This is what makes him great. He doesn't just host a game show, he connects with people. "All right, Brenda," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "Your mama got you 112 points. You need 88 more to get that $20,000 for your family. You ready to do this? You ready to change your life?" She nodded, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "I'm ready, Mr. Harvey." "Let's do it, then," he boomed, turning to the audience. 20 seconds on the clock. Let's go." The clock started. The questions came fast. Name something a man might buy his wife after they've had a big fight. "Flowers," Brenda blurted out. "Name a reason you might be late for work." "Traffic." "Name an animal you might see at a petting zoo." "A goat." It was a solid run. The answers were good, classic Feud responses. The buzzer sounded just as she got her last answer in. The studio was silent, waiting. I held my breath, even though I already knew the results. This was the magic of television. Steve turned to the big board. "All right, Brenda, you told me a man might buy his wife flowers after a fight. Survey says..." The number popped up. 45. A huge hit. The audience roared. The Henderson family was jumping up and down. "You said you might be late for work because of traffic. Survey says..." 32. Another solid score. They were at 77 points. They just needed 11 more. One more decent answer, and the money was theirs. My knuckles were white, gripping the edge of my console. "Okay, Brenda, here we go," Steve said, his voice tight with anticipation. "For $20,000, we asked 100 people, name an animal you might see at a petting zoo. You said, a goat." My stomach dropped. I knew the numbers. Goat was a good answer, but not the top answer. Sheep and rabbit had scored higher. It was going to be dangerously close. Brenda squeezed her eyes shut. Her kids were holding on to each other, their faces a mask of hope and fear. Steve milked the moment, his eyes scanning the board. "Is goat up there? Is it enough to put you over the top?" He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost painful. Then he yelled, "Survey says—" The number flashed on the board. 14. The world exploded. The board lit up with a final score of 203. Confetti cannons erupted, showering the stage in glittering paper. The music swelled. The Hendersons mobbed Brenda, screaming, crying, hugging. It was pure, unfiltered joy. Steve was right in the middle of it, a grin splitting his face, his arms wrapped around Brenda in a huge bear hug. "You did it!" he shouted over the music. "You did it!" From the booth, I smiled. This was a good show. A perfect ending. We'd send the Hendersons home with a check that would fix their car, get Jamal his braces, and give Brenda a chance to breathe for the first time in years. I motioned for my junior producer, Sarah, to start the wrap-up protocol. An hour later, the audience was gone, the confetti was swept up, and the families were in their respective green rooms. I was going over the final paperwork when Sarah buzzed me on the intercom. "Mark, you need to come down to Green Room B, like right now." Her voice was strained. "What's up? Is the family okay?" "Just come down here. Brenda Henderson is asking for you, and she looks weird." Weird? After winning 20 grand? I grabbed my clipboard and headed down the long corridor. When I walked into the Hendersons' green room, the celebratory vibe was gone. The kids were sitting quietly on the couch, and Brenda was standing by the door, her purse clutched in her hands. She wasn't smiling. She looked resolute, almost haunted. "Mark," she said, her voice low and steady, "thank you for everything. But I have a request." "Of course, Brenda. Anything." "Do you need a car service?" "Anything at all." She shook her head. "No, I need you to do something for me. I need you to take me to the Garcias' green room." I frowned. That was highly unusual. The winning and losing families were always kept separate after the show to avoid any awkwardness. "Brenda, I don't know if that's a good idea. Emotions are running high." "Please," she interrupted, looking me dead in the eye. Her gaze was intense, unwavering. "It's important. It's the most important thing." A knot of unease tightened in my gut. This wasn't right. Something was off. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Okay, follow me." I led her down the hall to Green Room C. I knocked softly before opening the door. The Garcia family looked up, their faces a mixture of disappointment and surprise. Mr. Garcia stood up, forcing a polite smile. "Congratulations again," he started to say, but Brenda held up a hand to stop him. She took a deep breath, her shoulders squared. She looked at Mr. Garcia, then at his wife, then at their 2 teenage kids sitting on the couch. Her voice didn't shake. It was perfectly clear. "We can't take the money," she said. The silence in the room was absolute. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did she just say? Mr. Garcia just stared at her, confused. What are you talking about?" Brenda took another step into the room, her expression unreadable. "Before the show, in the waiting area, I overheard you talking on the phone. About your daughter's medical bills, about the surgery she needs." She looked at the teenage girl on the couch, whose eyes went wide with shock. $20,000 will change my family's life," Brenda said, her voice cracking for the first time. "But it will save yours. We want you to have it. All of it." The air in Green Room C turned to glass. For a second, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Mr. Garcia's forced smile melted away, replaced by a look of profound, staggering disbelief. His wife, Maria, put a hand to her mouth, her eyes welling up with tears as she looked from Brenda to her daughter, Sophia. Sophia just stared, her face pale. I finally found my voice, stepping between the two families like a referee in a fight nobody saw coming. "Brenda, hold on," I said, keeping my voice low and calm, even though a 5-alarm fire was blazing in my head. Let's talk about this outside for a moment. This is a very generous gesture, but there are procedures." "It's not a gesture," Brenda said, her eyes never leaving the Garcias. "It's a decision. We won the money. It's ours, and we're giving it to them." Mr. Garcia finally shook his head, as if waking from a dream. "No, no, we can't accept that. You won fair and square. Your family, you need it too." His voice was thick with a mixture of pride and overwhelming gratitude. "What we need is to sleep at night," Brenda replied, a tremor in her voice now. "My Jamal needs braces, that's true, but your Sophia needs to live. There's no comparison. God put my family on that stage today for a reason, and it wasn't just for us." This was spiraling. I had a contractual agreement, signed by Brenda, that outlined the prize payout. I had tax forms, network regulations, a mountain of legal red tape that made what she was proposing a complete and utter impossibility from a production standpoint. We couldn't just redirect a $20,000 prize. It wasn't my money to move. "Brenda," I said, a little more firmly this time, "I understand what you're trying to do, and it's an incredible thing. But it's not that simple. The check is made out to you. There are tax implications, legal documents." "Then I will sign the check over to them the second I receive it," she stated, cutting me off. She turned back to the Garcias. "Please, don't take this away from my family. Let us do this one good thing. Please." Maria Garcia broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Her husband wrapped an arm around her, his own eyes shining. He looked at Brenda, then at me, utterly lost. The whole scene felt sacred and deeply problematic all at once. It was a beautiful human moment that was about to become my professional nightmare. I had to get control. "Okay," I said, pulling out my phone. "Everyone just stay here for a minute. Let me make a call. I need to get my boss and the network lawyers involved." The word lawyers hung in the air, sucking all the warmth out of the room. This was no longer about kindness. It was about liability. I excused myself and walked briskly down the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't call the lawyers first. There was only one person who could possibly navigate this, one person with the clout and the moral authority to make anyone listen. I headed straight for Steve's dressing room. I knocked twice and entered. He was sitting in a plush armchair, loosening his tie, a towel draped around his neck. He looked tired but happy. "Great show, Mark," he said, a wide grin on his face. "Man, that Brenda. What a woman. So happy for them. That's what this show is all about, right there." "Steve, we have a problem," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "A big one." His smile faded. "What's wrong?" "The kids okay?" "The kids are fine. It's Brenda. She's refusing the money." Steve blinked. "What? Refusing? Did somebody say something to her? Did she not get the full amount? 'Cause if accounting is trying to pull a fast one—" "No, nothing like that," I cut in. "She's not refusing it for herself. She's trying to give it away, all of it, to the Garcia family." I quickly recounted the entire scene in the green room, the overheard phone call, Brenda's declaration, the daughter's surgery. As I spoke, Steve's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something I couldn't quite read, a deep, complicated awe. He sat there for a long moment after I finished, just staring at the floor. He finally stood up, grabbing his suit jacket. "Where are they?" "Green Room C. But Steve, I have to warn you, I had to alert the network. A representative from Standards and Practices is already on her way down. It's getting messy." "Good," he said, his voice a low growl. "Let it." He strode out of the dressing room with a purpose I'd never seen before, and I had to practically jog to keep up with him. As we rounded the corner to the green room corridor, we could already hear voices. One was a sharp, clinical female voice I recognized as belonging to Cynthia Mills from S&P. "The contract you signed is legally binding," Cynthia was saying, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The prize is awarded to the winning contestant, Brenda Henderson. Period. We cannot and will not facilitate a direct transfer. It opens the network up to all sorts of legal and financial liabilities. It is simply not going to happen." We reached the open doorway. Cynthia, a severe woman in a gray pantsuit, was standing over Brenda, who was now seated, her children huddled around her. The Garcia family was pressed against the far wall, looking like horrified witnesses to a car crash. "It's my money," Brenda said, her voice small but defiant. "You can't tell me what I can and can't do with my own money." "Until it is processed, taxed, and dispersed, it is not your money, Ms. Henderson," Cynthia retorted coolly. "It is a prize administered by this network, and we will not be a party to this irregular and frankly irresponsible scheme of yours." I saw Steve's jaw clench. The muscles in his neck tightened. He took a step into the doorway, his large frame filling the space, casting a shadow into the room. Every head turned. The air crackled. Cynthia's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Steve ignored her completely. His eyes were locked on Brenda, who looked up at him, her face streaked with tears of frustration. "Mr. Harvey," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're trying to stop me." Steve's gaze softened for a fraction of a second as he looked at her, and then it hardened again as he turned his attention to Cynthia Mills. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet authority that radiated from him was more powerful than any shout. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Because it looks to me like this woman is trying to save a little girl's life, and you're standing in her way with a rule book." Cynthia Mills was not a woman easily intimidated. She'd spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder at the network, navigating the treacherous waters of talent egos, legal disputes, and FCC regulations. She was the human embodiment of the fine print on a contract, but even she seemed to flicker for a moment under the full, focused intensity of Steve Harvey's stare. She visibly straightened her spine, adjusting the blazer of her gray pantsuit. "Steve," she said, her voice regaining its crisp, professional edge. "With all due respect, this is a network matter. It's a legal and financial issue, not a moral one. We have protocols for a reason." Steve took another slow step into the room, his presence shrinking the already cramped space. He wasn't smiling. The affable, joke-cracking game show host was gone, replaced by someone harder, more formidable. "A moral one is exactly what it is, Cynthia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We just broadcast an hour of television where we talk about family, about helping each other, about doing the right thing. And now the cameras are off, and a woman is trying to live those values, and you're telling her she can't because of a protocol." "The protocols exist to protect everyone, including Ms. Henderson and the network," Cynthia shot back, refusing to yield. What if the Garcias claim they were coerced? What if Ms. Henderson changes her mind next week and sues us, claiming she was emotionally distressed? We are not a charity. We are a business. This transaction is messy, and we will not be the facilitators." A tense silence fell. Cynthia had laid out the cold, hard reality of the situation. From a corporate standpoint, she was right. But in that room, surrounded by the raw, desperate humanity of these two families, her logic felt hollow, almost cruel. Brenda's son, Jamal, who hadn't said a word the entire time, suddenly spoke up. "My mom isn't changing her mind," he said, his voice quiet but clear. He looked directly at Cynthia. "We talked about it. We all agree. Sophia needs the money more than I need braces." Sophia Garcia, who had been trying to make herself invisible in the corner, let out a small, choked sob. Steve's eyes flickered over to Jamal, and a flicker of pride, of profound respect, softened his features. He turned back to Cynthia. "You hear that? The whole family is on board. This isn't some emotionally distressed decision. This is a choice. This is character. And this show, my show, is supposed to be about that." "It's not your show, Steve," Cynthia said, her voice dangerously quiet. "It's the network's show, and the network has made its decision. That was it. That was the line." I saw something shift in Steve's eyes. It was a look I had only seen once or twice before, usually directed at a contestant who'd said something truly outrageous. It was a look that said, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that echoed in the silent room. "The network's decision," he repeated softly. He looked around the room, at the Hendersons, at the Garcias, at me, and then his gaze landed back on Cynthia. Okay, I see." He reached up and began unbuttoning the cuffs of his shirt. "Mark," he said, not taking his eyes off Cynthia, "get everyone from my crew in here. I want cameras. I want sound. Get 'em in here right now." I froze. "Steve, what are you doing? We're wrapped. The crew is packing up." "Then tell 'em to unpack," he commanded, his voice steel. "Tell them it's an order from me. You got 5 minutes." Cynthia's face was a mask of confusion and alarm. "What is this?" "You can't just start filming. There are union rules, schedules." Steve ignored her, walking over to Brenda. He knelt down in front of her, taking her hands in his. His whole demeanor changed, the anger melting away, replaced by that fatherly warmth he was so famous for. "Brenda," he said gently, "you are a remarkable woman. You know that, right? You have raised incredible children, and what you're doing right now, this is legacy. Don't you let anyone tell you different." Brenda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm just trying to do what's right." "I know," he said. He gave her hands a squeeze and stood up just as 2 of my camera operators and a sound guy rushed into the room, looking bewildered. "Boss? What's going on?" asked Dave, my lead cameraman. "Just roll, Dave. Point it at me. Make sure my mic is hot," Steve ordered. He walked to the center of the small room, which now felt like a packed television studio. He adjusted his tie, looked directly into the lens of the main camera, and took a deep breath. Cynthia looked like she was about to have a stroke. "What do you think you're doing, Harvey?" she hissed. Steve held up a hand, silencing her, without even looking at her. The familiar red light on the camera flicked on. He was live, at least to us. "My name is Steve Harvey," he began, his voice resonating with the smooth, powerful cadence of a Sunday morning preacher. "For many years, I've had the privilege of hosting a show called Family Feud. We bring families on, we have a few laughs, and we give them a chance to win a little money that can hopefully make their lives a little easier. We've always said this show is about family. It's about love. It's about community. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Tonight, a woman named Brenda Henderson won $20,000 on this stage. And then she did something I have never seen in all my years in this business. She saw another family in pain, a family with a sick child who desperately needed help, and she decided to give all of that money to them. Not some of it, all of it. An act of grace so profound it leaves you speechless. He finally turned his head and looked at Cynthia, the camera following his movement. And the network, the people in charge. Their response was to quote a rule book, to talk about liability, to tell this good woman, "No, you can't." They want to stop her. He turned back to the camera, his eyes burning with unrighteous fire. "Well, I got a little news for the network. This is bigger than your protocols. This is bigger than your liability waivers. This is about doing the right thing. And if the network won't facilitate it, then I will." My blood ran cold. I knew where this was going. "So, here's what's going to happen," Steve declared, his voice booming in the small room. "The Henderson family is going to get their $20,000 check, just like they're owed. And as for the Garcia family," he reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, "I'm going to write them a check myself, for $20,000, right now." He pulled out a personal checkbook and a pen. The room was utterly, completely silent, except for the sound of Maria Garcia's weeping. Cynthia's face was pale, her mouth agape. "You can't do that." That undermines the entire prize structure." "To hell with the prize structure," Steve roared, turning on her. "This is about a little girl's life. And I will not stand here and be a part of a system that tells a good person they can't help someone in need." He looked back at the camera. "And you can put that on the 6 o'clock news." He started to write out the check, his movements deliberate and firm. But then he stopped. He looked at the checkbook in his hand, then up at the ceiling, a strange, calculating look on his face. The fire in his eyes was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He slowly put the cap back on his pen and slid the checkbook back into his pocket. "You know what?" he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "No, that's not right either. That lets the network off the hook. That lets them hide behind my money while their rules win." He took a step towards the door, his face set like stone. He looked at me. "Mark, thank you for everything. You've been a great producer." He looked at Brenda and the Garcias. "God bless both of you." Then he turned and looked at Cynthia Mills, his eyes filled with a terrifying final resolve. "You tell your bosses at the network that I have a new decision for them," he said, his voice barely audible but carrying the weight of an earthquake. "You tell them that as of this moment, I quit." He unclipped his microphone from his tie, letting it drop to the floor with a loud metallic clatter. And then, without another word, Steve Harvey turned and walked out of the room. The thud of Steve's microphone hitting the cheap linoleum floor was the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone completely silent. It felt like a grenade had been rolled into the room, and we were all just waiting for the explosion. Cynthia Mills stood frozen, her face a ghastly shade of white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The camera operator, Dave, slowly lowered his camera, his eyes wide with shock, looking at me as if to ask, "Did that just happen?" It did. Steve Harvey, the face of the network's highest-rated daytime show, had just quit, on camera, in front of 2 families and a senior producer, and the reason was sitting right here in this cramped beige-green room. The spell broke. Cynthia fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. "Shut that camera off!" she shrieked at Dave. "Give me the tape!" "Now!" "It's a digital card, ma'am," Dave said, his voice flat. "And I don't take orders from you. I take them from my producer." He looked at me, his eyebrows raised. I was the man in the middle, caught between a network executive on the verge of a meltdown and the smoking crater of my career. Before I could even formulate a response, Mr. Garcia stepped forward. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "Everyone, stop. This has gone too far. We never wanted this. We can't be the reason that man loses his job. We'll figure something else out for Sophia. We always do." He looked at Brenda, his eyes filled with a pained gratitude. "Brenda, your heart is the greatest gift we could ever receive. Please, don't let this happen." Brenda looked devastated, as if her act of kindness had somehow curdled into a catastrophe. I just wanted to help," she whispered. My mind was racing. Steve hadn't just walked out. He'd detonated a bomb and left me holding the fuse. He knew exactly what he was doing. The footage on Dave's camera wasn't just a recording, it was a weapon. If that footage ever got out, and knowing Steve, he was probably counting on it, the network would be crucified in the court of public opinion. Mega millionaire host quits show to defend family's right to donate winnings to sick child. The headlines would be catastrophic. Cynthia was now pacing frantically, speaking in hushed, panicked tones into her phone. "Unacceptable. Breach of contract. He walked. Yes, I have the producer here." She shot me a venomous look. I knew I had a choice. I could fall in line, make my crew hand over the footage, and try to salvage my job. I'd probably have to sign 100 NDAS and spend the next 6 months in damage control meetings, but I'd survive. Or I could honor the man who had just put everything on the line for what he believed in. I walked over to Dave. "Keep it rolling," I said quietly. "Don't you dare erase a single frame." I then turned and faced the room. "Okay, everybody listen to me," I said, my voice much calmer than I felt. "Brenda, Mr. Garcia, I need you both to trust me. Cynthia, you need to call your boss, the president of the network, and put him on speakerphone right now." Cynthia looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "I will do no such thing." "Yes, you will," I said, my voice hard. "Because in about 10 minutes, if we don't have a solution, I'm going to walk this memory card out the front door and give it to the first TMZ reporter I can find, and I'll be sure to tell them that you, Cynthia Mills, personally stood in the way of a family trying to help a sick child and then bullied them after the man who stood up for them quit in protest. How do you think that'll play on Twitter?" Her face went from pale to transparent. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Her career would be over before the story even hit the evening news. Without another word, she jabbed at her phone, and a moment later, a deep, authoritative voice filled the room. "Cynthia, what in God's name is going on?" "My phone is blowing up." "Mr. Thompson, sir," Cynthia stammered. It's under control. Steve Harvey has had an episode. He's made some threats." "Enough, Cynthia," I interrupted. "Mr. Thompson, my name is Mark Salgado. I'm the senior producer on Feud. Mr. Harvey hasn't had an episode. He just took a moral stand that your network apparently finds inconvenient. I'm standing here in a room with 2 wonderful families who have been put through an emotional wood chipper for the last hour. I also have a camera that has recorded every single second of it, including Mr. Harvey quitting the show because you wouldn't allow a winning family to donate their prize money to a losing family whose daughter needs life-saving surgery." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in a multi-million-dollar brain, calculating risk, exposure, and public perception. "What do you want, Mark?" Mr. Thompson finally asked, his voice dangerously smooth. "It's not what I want, sir. It's about doing what's right, which is something Mr. Harvey seems to understand better than anyone else at the network. Here's what's going to happen. The network is going to honor Brenda Henderson's wishes. You will facilitate the transfer of her $20,000 winnings directly to the Garcia family. You will handle all tax implications and legal paperwork to make that happen, at no cost to either family." "That's irregular," he said curtly. "I'm not finished," I said, pressing on. "The network is also going to make a separate donation of $20,000 to the charity of Brenda Henderson's choice, as a thank you for reminding us all what family is really about. And finally, you, sir, are going to personally call Steve Harvey, apologize for this entire fiasco, and beg him to come back to the show he has made into a cultural phenomenon." Another long pause. Cynthia was staring at me, her expression a cocktail of pure hatred and grudging respect. "And if I agree to this creative solution," Mr. Thompson said slowly, "that recording, it disappears? It becomes a heartwarming piece of behind-the-scenes footage that we can use for the Christmas special," I said. "Proof that this show and this network have a heart." The line was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Then a low sigh. "Get the paperwork started for the transfer and the donation," Mr. Thompson said, his voice dripping with resignation. "I'll handle Harvey." The line went dead. Cynthia stared at her phone, then at me, then at the two families who were now clinging to each other, weeping with relief. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the room, defeated. An hour later, everything was done. A network lawyer, looking exhausted, had drawn up a simple one-page document which both families signed. The transfer was initiated. I walked the Hendersons and the Garcias to the parking lot together. There were no more winners or losers. They were just two families bound by an extraordinary act of kindness. Brenda and Maria hugged for a long time, promising to stay in touch, to send pictures of Sophia after her surgery, of Jamal with his new braces, which, Brenda whispered to me, Mr. Harvey had called and offered to pay for himself, an offer she tearfully accepted. As they drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Nice work, son. See you at the taping tomorrow. S.E.H." I looked up at the giant studio building, the lights now dark, the chaos of the day finally settled. I didn't think I'd seen it all before, but now maybe I had. I'd seen a TV show become more than just a game. I'd seen a producer risk his career and a star risk his empire, all because a single mom with nothing decided to give away everything. And in the end, in the quiet aftermath of it all, everybody won.